My name is Ainsley. I'm 32, and if you saw me on the street, you'd probably think I had it all together. Neat bun, sensible shoes, a no-nonsense expression that's been carefully cultivated over decades. I run a small, successful accounting firm, I pay my bills on time, and my houseplants are thriving. On paper, I'm the picture of stability. But lately, when I look in the mirror, I don't recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes are hollow, her shoulders carry an invisible weight, and there's a tremor in her hands that I can't seem to control. It started subtly, a slight tremble when I reached for a coffee cup, a stutter in my breath when the phone rang. Now it's a constant low-level hum of anxiety that threatens to erupt at any moment. You see, for my entire life, I've been the strong one. The dependable daughter, the responsible big sister, the rock that everyone else leaned on. I fixed problems, I mediated arguments, I swallowed my own pain to make sure everyone else was okay. But then the foundation cracked. My mother's diagnosis, my brother's reckless decisions, my father's quiet despair. It all converged, and suddenly, the weight became too much. The moment of a complete break happened last Tuesday. I was on the phone with my brother, Liam. He was asking for money again, a significant amount this time, to bail him out of another one of his ventures. As he spoke, his voice laced with the usual mix of desperation and entitlement, I felt a familiar pressure building in my chest. But this time it was different. I opened my mouth to respond, to offer my usual calm, rational solution, and nothing came out. Just a strangled sound, and then the uncontrollable shaking started. My hand flew to my mouth, trying to suppress it, but it was useless. My entire body was trembling, and I couldn't stop it. It was like every suppressed emotion, every unspoken fear, every swallowed tear of the last 3 decades had finally decided to stage a violent revolt. How do you ask for help when you've always been the one giving it? How do you admit you're drowning when everyone expects you to be walking on water? If you've ever felt like you're holding up the sky, only to realize your own legs are buckling, then this story is for you. Share your own moments of weakness, because sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step towards finding your footing. I remember the exact moment the mantle of the strong one was placed upon my shoulders. I was 8 years old. Liam, barely 4, had managed to climb onto the kitchen counter and was reaching for a cookie jar. It teetered precariously, and I instinctively lunged forward, catching it just before it crashed to the floor. My mother, who had been in the other room, rushed in, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't scold Liam, instead she hugged me tight, whispering, "Oh, Ainsley, my brave girl. You saved the day." From that moment on, it was my role. When Liam scraped his knee, I was the one who calmly cleaned the wound. When my parents argued, I was the one who drew pictures at the kitchen table, creating a silent, steady presence that seemed to subtly lower the volume of their voices. It wasn't explicitly stated, but it was understood. I was the eldest, the sensible one, the responsible one. My parents, good people who were simply trying their best, reinforced this narrative with every "Ainsley will know what to do," or "Ask Ainsley, she's so good at these things." And I absorbed it, internalized it, made it my identity. It felt good, for a while, to be needed, to be the one they all relied on. It made me feel important, valuable. But what I didn't realize then was that by always being the solution, I was slowly, imperceptibly, losing my own right to struggle. I was building a fortress around myself, a perfectly maintained exterior that protected everyone else, but left me isolated within its walls. I became a master of suppression, pushing down my own fears, anxieties, and desires. There was no room for them. They were weaknesses that could compromise my ability to be strong for others. This pattern continued through my teenage years and into adulthood. When my father's business struggled, I was the one who researched grants and budget cuts. When Liam dropped out of college for the 3rd time, I was the one who found him a temporary job and talked him down from his latest crisis. Every family storm, every individual tremor, I was there, a steady hand, a calm voice, a reassuring presence. But the truth was, beneath that placid surface, a quiet panic was beginning to brew. A small, almost imperceptible crack was forming in the foundation, and I was too busy shoring up everyone else's walls to notice my own crumbling. The more I gave, the more I emptied myself, until there was nothing left but a shell of the person I once was, shaking with the effort of holding it all together. The constant hum of expectation, the silent pressure to perform, was a weight I'd carried for so long it felt like a part of my own skeleton. But even the strongest bones can fracture under immense, sustained pressure. My parents, bless their hearts, always meant well. They had their own struggles, their own anxieties, which, in hindsight, they projected onto me, their seemingly capable firstborn. My mother, always a worrier, found solace in my quiet competence. My father, prone to bouts of melancholia, often retreated, leaving me to pick up the pieces. We lived in a charming, but perpetually slightly too small house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. From the outside, we were the ideal American family. White picket fence, metaphorical, of course. Ours was chain link, 2 kids, a dog. Our lives were curated for public consumption, a carefully constructed facade of normalcy. Every family dinner, every holiday gathering, was a performance. We smiled for the camera, we laughed at my father's tired jokes, we pretended that Liam's latest academic misadventure was just a phase. And I, Ainsley, was the chief orchestrator of this charade. I was the one who reminded Liam to brush his hair before relatives arrived, the one who made sure the table was set just so, the one who deflected any awkward questions about our internal turmoil with a bright, manufactured smile. I became adept at reading the room, at anticipating potential landmines and defusing them before they exploded. It was a skill born of necessity, a survival mechanism in a household that, beneath its veneer of calm, was always teetering on the edge of chaos. I learned early on that my own emotions were inconvenient. My sadness, my anger, my fear, they were disruptive elements that threatened the fragile peace I worked so hard to maintain. So, I pushed them down, buried them deep within, until I almost forgot what it felt like to truly feel. I became a master of emotional containment, a human dam holding back a reservoir of unspoken pain. This extended beyond my family. In school, I was the reliable student, always submitting assignments on time, never causing a fuss. My teachers praised my maturity, my friends sought my advice, and I reveled in the external validation that came with being the good one. But it was a gilded cage, beautiful on the outside but suffocating within. I started to believe that my worth was entirely tied to my ability to maintain this perfect image, to be strong and unwavering for everyone else. Any crack in that facade felt like a catastrophic failure, a betrayal of the trust placed in me. The idea of reaching out, of admitting I was struggling, felt alien, a language I no longer knew how to speak. The fear of disappointing them, of letting them down, was a tangible weight in my chest, more suffocating than any real-world problem. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more I pretended to be strong, the more others expected it, and the less I felt able to reveal my true, vulnerable self. The fear of the ripple effect, of showing weakness and watching my carefully constructed world collapse, was a terror that kept me trapped in this cycle of silent strength. The air shifted around me, becoming heavier, denser, as if the very atoms were imbued with the weight of my past. Each breath was a conscious effort, a silent prayer for release. The first subtle signs were easy to dismiss. A slight tremor in my left hand as I signed a document. A momentary weakness in my knees when I stood up too quickly. I attributed them to stress, to late nights at the office, to the general exhaustion of modern life. I told myself I just needed more sleep, more coffee, more control. But the tremors grew more frequent, more insistent. They started in my hands, then moved to my voice, a slight wobble when I spoke under pressure. I started avoiding situations where I might be exposed, where my carefully constructed facade might crack. I practiced deep breathing exercises, I meditated, I even tried a yoga class. Anything to regain that familiar sense of control that was slowly, terrifyingly, slipping away. The real turning point, the moment I couldn't ignore it anymore, was my mother's diagnosis. Breast cancer. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My father, usually so stoic, crumbled. Liam, true to form, disappeared into a haze of self-pity and what he called contemplative solitude, which mostly involved playing video games in his darkened apartment. And I, Ainsley, was immediately thrust into action. I researched oncologists, scheduled appointments, managed her medication, coordinated meals, and became the primary point of contact for every concerned relative and friend. I was the general, barking orders, making decisions, holding my family together while my own world felt like it was fracturing into a million pieces. There were moments late at night, when the house was silent and the weight of it all became unbearable. I would sit in the darkness, the tremor in my hands a frantic drumbeat against my thighs, and tears would stream down my face, silent and hot. But by morning, the mask was back on. The resolute expression, the calm voice, the unwavering focus. I couldn't afford to break. They needed me. My mother's illness amplified every existing family dynamic, every unspoken expectation. My father looked to me with a silent plea for reassurance. Liam called, not to offer support, but to complain about the unfairness of it all, implicitly expecting me to fix his emotional distress as well as my mother's physical one. I was stretched thin, a tightly wound spring on the verge of snapping. The shaking became more pronounced, less easily concealed. I found myself clenching my fists under tables, hiding my hands in my pockets, speaking less to avoid the telltale quiver in my voice. The fear of being exposed, of showing this raw, debilitating vulnerability, was almost as terrifying as the situation itself. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping around me, and every fiber of my being was screaming for help, but I couldn't utter a sound. The silence was deafening, the isolation absolute. And still, I held on, gripping the crumbling edges of my strength, shaking with the effort. The silence in the room, heavy with unspoken needs, pressed in on me, mirroring the silence in my own soul where words of weakness dared not form. The phone call from Liam was the final straw. He'd been quiet for a few weeks, which in itself was a red flag. He usually checked in, even if it was just to ask for money or complain about something trivial. When his name flashed on my screen, a knot formed in my stomach. "Ainsley," he started, his voice unusually subdued. I messed up. Big time." He proceeded to tell me, in a torrent of shame and self-pity, that he'd invested all of his meager savings and a significant amount he'd borrowed, from where I didn't dare ask, into a dubious online scheme that had predictably evaporated overnight. He was in debt, deep debt, and the people he owed were not the kind of people you wanted to cross. He needed $20,000 immediately, or he trailed off, implying unspeakable consequences. My carefully constructed composure, already paper-thin from months of navigating my mother's illness, snapped. I could feel the tremor starting in my fingertips, crawling up my arms, seizing my entire body. I tried to speak, to formulate a coherent response, to articulate the sheer frustration and despair that was bubbling to the surface, but all that came out was a choked, gasping sound. My hands were shaking so violently that the phone almost slipped from my grasp. I gripped it tighter, knuckles white, digging my nails into my palm, trying to ground myself. "Liam," I finally managed, my voice a barely audible whisper, thick with unshed tears. I can't." The words felt foreign, alien on my tongue. I had never said "I can't" to Liam, or to anyone in my family, not when they truly needed me. His immediate response was a mixture of disbelief and anger. "What do you mean you can't? You always figure it out, Ainsley. This isn't like you." His words were a stab to the heart, confirming my worst fears. He didn't see me as a person with limits, with vulnerabilities. He saw me as a machine, programmed to solve his problems. My breathing became shallow, ragged. My vision blurred with tears, hot and stinging, that I desperately tried to blink back. I could feel the world spinning, the room tilting on its axis. The phone pressed against my ear felt like a lead weight, and Liam's voice, now a distant, enraged drone, seemed to be echoing from a faraway cavern. I wanted to scream, to rage, to tell him how utterly exhausted I was, how terrified, how utterly alone. But the words were trapped in my throat, choked by the shame of admitting weakness, by the sheer, overwhelming effort of trying to keep myself from collapsing entirely. All I could do was shake, a silent, violent testament to the complete and utter breakdown of the strong one. The phone eventually slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. I sank to my knees, the tremors shaking me from head to toe, utterly and completely broken. The heavy silence that followed Liam's call was a deafening roar in my ears, punctuated only by the ragged sound of my own breath. It was the sound of a carefully constructed world crumbling around me. Hours later, I was still on the floor, curled into a ball, my body racked with tremors that refused to subside. The sun had set, and the room was plunged into darkness, mirroring the blackness that had consumed me. I lay there, not moving, not thinking, just existing in a state of raw, unadulterated terror. The phone lay forgotten on the carpet, a silent accusation. I hadn't called anyone back. I couldn't. The thought of speaking, of explaining, of revealing this shattered version of myself, was unbearable. My mind raced, replaying every moment, every expectation, every time I had swallowed my own needs for the sake of others. I saw myself, an 8-year-old girl, proudly holding the cookie jar, accepting the praise that solidified my role. I saw myself as a teenager, mediating arguments, offering solutions, being the calm in the storm. I saw myself now, a trembling shell of a woman, unable to even lift a glass of water without spilling it. The shame was a burning coal in my gut. I was a failure. I had finally broken. And in breaking, I had let everyone down. The fear was insidious. Fear of judgment, fear of pity, fear of what would happen if I truly let go. Would they abandon me? Would they be angry? Would they see me as weak, as incapable, as the very thing I had always strived not to be? These fears, ingrained over a lifetime, were more powerful than the physical shaking, more paralyzing than the emotional pain. I thought of my mother, frail and undergoing chemotherapy, relying on me. I thought of my father, lost without my guidance. I thought of Liam, always finding new ways to stumble, always expecting me to catch him. How could I possibly burden them with my own fragility? It felt selfish, irresponsible, a betrayal of everything I had ever been. The tremor was a constant reminder, a physical manifestation of my internal turmoil. It was a scream that my voice couldn't utter, a cry for help that my pride wouldn't allow. I was trapped in a cage of my own making, reinforced by the expectations of others, and I didn't know how to break free. The silence in the house was oppressive, amplifying the sound of my own ragged breaths. Every fiber of my being yearned for comfort, for understanding, for someone to simply tell me it was okay to not be okay. But the words, "I need help," remained locked behind a wall of fear and shame, reverberating only in the silent, shaking chambers of my own heart. A chill permeated the room, seeping into my bones, a cold reminder of the isolation I had built for myself, brick by silent brick. The next morning, I woke up on the floor, stiff and disoriented. The tremors were still there, a low thrum beneath my skin, but something was different. The exhaustion was so profound, so complete, that it had stripped away the last vestiges of my carefully constructed defenses. There was no more energy for pretense, no more strength for the charade. I was simply empty. As I slowly, painfully pushed myself up, my eyes landed on my phone, still lying on the carpet. For a long moment, I stared at it, a symbol of my failure, of my fear. Then a strange thought surfaced. What if I didn't have to be strong? What if, for once, I allowed myself to be human? The idea was terrifying, exhilarating. It was like standing on the edge of a precipice, knowing that one step could send you plummeting or soaring. My therapist, Dr. Evans, had left me a message a few days prior, just a routine check-in. I hadn't returned her call. Now, with trembling fingers, I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over her name in my contacts list. Every instinct screamed at me to put it down, to pretend nothing was wrong, to resume the role of Ainsley, the problem solver. But the tremor was a relentless reminder, a silent scream that could no longer be ignored. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I pressed call. The ringing felt impossibly loud in the quiet apartment. One ring, two, three, and then her calm, kind voice. "Ainsley? Is everything all right?" For a moment, my throat seized up. The old habits, the ingrained patterns, fought fiercely against this desperate new impulse. But the tremor was too strong, the exhaustion too profound. "No," I whispered, the word barely audible, a fragile whisper in the vast silence of my apartment. "No, Dr. Evans. I'm not all right." And then the dam broke. The tears came, hot and fast, not silent this time, but racking sobs that shook my entire body. I crumpled back to the floor, the phone pressed against my ear, listening to Dr. Evans's reassuring voice, offering comfort, offering help without a hint of judgment or surprise. She didn't tell me to be strong. She didn't tell me to pull myself together. She just listened, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. It was the first time in my life I had truly, completely admitted weakness. And as the tears flowed, something shifted. The shaking didn't stop immediately, but the suffocating pressure in my chest eased just a fraction. A tiny, almost imperceptible glimmer of light in the overwhelming darkness. It was a terrifying step into the unknown, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of hope. I had finally, after years of silent suffering, opened the door, even if it was just a crack. The phone call ended, but the echo of my vulnerability lingered in the air, not as a source of shame, but as a faint, budding promise of something new. It's been 6 months since that day on the floor. My mother is in remission, still battling fatigue, but her spirit is strong. My father has slowly started to re-engage, finding purpose in caring for my mother. And Liam? He's still Liam. He's in a program now, slowly working his way out of debt, still prone to impulsive decisions, but he's finally starting to take responsibility for his own actions. He still asks for help sometimes, but now it's a request, not an expectation. As for me, the tremors haven't vanished completely. They appear when I'm tired, when I'm overwhelmed, when old anxieties rear their heads. But now they're not a terrifying secret, they're a signal. A reminder that I need to slow down, to breathe, to ask for help. I've started therapy, something I always thought was for other people. I'm learning to identify my own needs, to set boundaries, to say no without guilt. It's a slow, arduous process, unlearning decades of ingrained habits. But I'm finally learning that being strong doesn't mean never needing help. It means being brave enough to ask for it. It means understanding that vulnerability isn't a weakness, but a profound strength. The biggest lesson? We are not meant to carry the weight of the world alone. Our worth isn't tied to our ability to fix everyone else's problems. It's tied to our inherent value as human beings, flaws and all. If you're out there, shaking in silence, feeling the immense pressure of holding it all together, please know this: you are not alone. Your worth is not defined by your capacity to be the strong one. There is immense courage in admitting your vulnerability, in reaching out a trembling hand and saying, "I need help." What is one small step you can take today to lighten your load, to acknowledge your own needs? Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stop pretending you're okay, and finally, bravely, let yourself be human. This journey of healing is ongoing, but I'm finally learning to walk forward, one shaky step at a time, towards a future where my strength comes not from suppression, but from acceptance and connection.